That did indeed come out of my C5 flying days. So one of the jobs we had was we would fly Navy SEALs into various deployments. And they were fascinating to work with. And the Air Force, for some reason, seemed to take great pleasure in assigning me to be the aircraft commander of SEAL units when they moved. And I believe it was just kind of to tweak the SEALs to give them a woman pilot. But I was a good pilot. I could put an airplane anywhere we needed to. And so I got along very well with them, but I would watch them getting on the planes and offloading and doing these cool, they would get into dune buggies and drive them off my airplane into the desert and disappear. And I always had it going through my head, boy, it would be cool to be one of those guys. Man, what it would be like to be one of them. Geez, what would it take for a woman to be a SEAL? And of course, the reality is the SEALs are so physically strong. Women wouldn't really be able to, at that time, there weren't women athletes of a fitness level where they could keep up with the SEALs. And any SEAL will tell you the team is only as strong as its weakest member. And I had a cousin who was an Army Ranger, a very senior Army Ranger. He was the executive officer of the Ranger Battalion at Fort Bragg. And he would come to Washington, D.C., where I was stationed, to visit the Pentagon, and we would always go out for dinner. And I cornered him one night and said, all right, Cousin Ralph. And this is, by the way, this is one of the storytellers from my childhood in Kentucky. And I said, if there were going to be women in the special forces, and I had to wait then for him to quit giggling, what do you think of, instead of putting a woman with a male team and bringing down the strength of the team, we did entire teams of women and then profiled missions to fit their physical capabilities? And he went dead silent and thought about it for a while, and then proceeded to spend an entire weekend with me plotting missions that would be fit the capabilities of women. And that's how the Medusas were born. And it's about the formation of the team. And that's maybe one of my 2 or 3 all-time favorite books that I've ever written. So it was a magical story. I wrote it in 19 days. It has 19 chapters, and I wrote a chapter a day. And it was just one of those books that flowed from the muse, fully formed and perfect when it came to me. I felt more like I was the vessel typing it than the person creating it. My editors gave me an awful lot of freedom to let the story dictate that. So in some stories, there would be more romance, more character, more relationship. And in some, they were really almost straight action adventure novels with very little romance in them. I would certainly say that of the Medusa series. They were really more action adventure novels than actual romances ever. And they just let me do it. So Helen Warwick is the heroine of Second Shot and an upcoming book called Double Tap, which comes out in about a month. And she's a woman assassin of a certain age. And she's been retired forcibly because she had a birthday from her job at the CIA, and all of her old enemies come calling. And honestly, the real thing I wanted to write about is women of that age are not dead. And in society today, there's a tendency to take women in their 50s and 60s and make us invisible. And I am one of those women, and I wanted to write a love letter to all of my sisters in middle age that we are still strong and capable and have a great deal to contribute. I certainly know where the character arc is going. I certainly know what her wants and needs and fears are. And I know a fair bit about her relationship with her family and the other characters in the book well before I start writing. And the thing that was interesting about her was I wanted her to be classy. And I know that's a weird thing to attach to an assassin, somebody who shoots people for a living, but I wanted her to be a family woman. I wanted her to have a marriage with, although it's a marriage with some problems, it's got some fire to it. She's got an engaged relationship with her adult children. They've got problems to work out, but she's really committed to her family. And I wanted her to have the dichotomy of really being committed to her family and really being committed to her country and her work, and what happens when those two things come into conflict with each other. And what does that do to a person who's pulled by the two most important things in their life in opposite directions? When I found out that Second Shot was being adapted for television by a major streaming service, I had an opportunity to speak with the producers, and their one comment about Second Shot was they thought there were too many murders for good TV. Which surprised me. But when I went into Double Tap, I went in knowing that I was going to have fewer murders, but I was going to try to make them more interesting and higher quality murders. So in Second Shot, Helen thinks she's killed a pretty bad guy. And we find out right at the beginning of Double Tap that, in fact, she has not. And he's alive and mad and now coming after her family. So the personal war between Helen and Scorpius, who is a Russian mole inside the CIA, heats up pretty dramatically in book 2.